Hi, my name is Piotr. I'm glad to have you here. Today I'll be covering a really interesting topic. I asked on LinkedIn what would people like to see the most, and quite a bit of them mentioned number 2, 2, 2, 2, and 2, which is Vapi versus LiveKit versus Pipecat versus Retell. So in general, different voice AI providers and my learnings from 15 million calls in call center. So this is extremely interesting topic, and I didn't want to cover it in a way that I'm just gonna essentially serve as LLM for you guys to tell you what I found on particular topic, and that's it. I really want to make it personalized in terms of how I feel about the platforms and what problems they solve and for whom, because I don't believe every platform serves every single customer. It's just not doable. So without further ado, let's go into it. I made a spreadsheet. Yes, spreadsheet. To help judge different voice AI providers along the way. I think the approach of judging provider by a size of your business will be quite cool. Potentially it could be also by type of business, but this would be a much longer list and I don't have that much time. So the way I divided this is into 3 types: small, medium, and large businesses. And each of the questions has each question has different weight applied to it. So that way I know which question is most important for particular criteria for particular type of company. So the first thing I have is extensibility. How extensible is the platform for custom logic integrations and infrastructure? So what that means is how easily I can use a different LLM, use a different text-to-speech, speech-to-text. How many options do I have? What if I'd like to use a different VAD, or actually attach some custom analytics, and so on and so forth. And with Vapi, it is fairly okay. They are closed source, but they have a lot of different integrations. So I'm going to give it a 1. The scale will be from 0 to 2, where 0 is terrible, 2 is perfect, and 1 is quite good. Same with ElevenLabs. To be fair, they are worse than Vapi. They have less options, but they're also developing very fast. So maybe in 2 months, this video will not reflect as well what ElevenLabs has, but it will never be 2 for them anyway, because they are also closed source. For Pipecat, it's 2. You can do whatever you want with this framework, so it's very extensible. With Retell, alright. They're also closed source, but they have even less options than the previous ones. But I'm gonna give it a 1 because you do still have some integrations baked in. With LiveKit, part of them is open source, part of them is not. I'd say they are better than Vapi or ElevenLabs, but it's still not like you can do truly anything you want with the platform. So I'm gonna give it a 1, but do keep in mind that they are quite good at it, generally speaking. Telnyx is a similar story to ElevenLabs or Vapi or LiveKit. Okay, with the simplicity. So how simple it is to ship an agent that works. It's super simple with Vapi. They have recently they added like agentic creation of agents, let's call it. I don't really recommend this approach. However, for getting started to see how things work on the platform, it's fine. For very, very, very simple debugging, it's also probably fine. So I'm going to give it a 2. Vapi has a really, really nice developer ergonomics, let's call it. Same for ElevenLabs. In fact, ElevenLabs is even a little bit easier because the options on their platform for like interruption detection and when the agents should chime in are very high level. So what you can say is something like interrupt a lot or don't interrupt, and you don't really tweak settings very carefully. Whereas on Vapi you have more capabilities there. So it's on ElevenLabs it's even simpler to like hit the ground running. With Pipecat, sorry, it's zero. It's not simple. You need to set up Docker container and like orchestrate everything if you want to set it up for production. So it's really not that simple. You can also use their cloud solution, obviously for the infra, but generally speaking, Pipecat is not an easy framework. I would not recommend it if you have very little programming knowledge or no programming knowledge at all. In my opinion, not everyone needs Pipecat, but Pipecat is amazing if you need it. With Retell, it's also very simple. Same with LiveKit. Hitting the ground running is very simple. And with Telnyx, I'd probably also give it a 2. They also have APIs and fairly intuitive platform to work on. Latency. So how low and consistent is end-to-end conversational latency? So Vapi has their infra in US, right? And only in US, at least, to my knowledge so far. What that means is if you have customers in India, in EU, in different places of the earth, essentially, then the latency gets bigger, obviously, because the data has to travel quite a lot. And for that reason, the latency for them is a little bit lower. And let me be very specific. The amount of latency added in here because of how the platform is created is probably roughly around 150 milliseconds. I'm basing that on the benchmarks that I saw. So it's not a huge change. It's not gonna tell you, it's not gonna make your customers go away from using your product, but it is important to keep in mind. I believe it's gonna be similar for ElevenLabs. They're still very new to the game. I'm not sure if in how many places they have their infra right now, but I don't think it's very optimized on that front. With Pipecat, I believe you have, you definitely have an option to host it yourself if you want, and you can make it as good as humanly possible. So on that front, it's very extensible, and you can make the latency very solid. For that reason, I'm gonna go with 2 because you can definitely achieve that. Retell, I believe according to the benchmarks that I saw, they were actually doing really well. They were in front of Vapi, I believe. And either just behind LiveKit or on par, almost on par with LiveKit, something like that. So I'm gonna give 2 to both these because the latency was really good for them. And with Telnyx, it's probably even the best latency from all of these, but generally speaking, none of them really has a terrible one anyway. So I cannot really grade them 0 in there. So Telnyx has collocated infrastructure. What that means is that GPUs, servers, everything lies within a similar location to where the phone call is being made. And for that reason, they are definitely leading the space in here. It's not that easy to get collocated everything. So props to them on that. UX, how polished is the builder dashboard and overall user experience? So on Vapi, I'd say it's kind of slow, the UI, but apart from being slow, you get a lot of different options, and it's very intuitive, generally speaking, how to navigate it. And you can see a lot of different metrics on the calls, filter through them quite easily as well. So I'd say it's overall fairly solid. The only thing is not all of their stuff works. and it's driving me crazy. But I'm not gonna get into that too much because probably all of the platforms have their quirks. The UX on ElevenLabs of making the agent really solid. They still have few bugs here and there, a few things that don't really make sense. It's obviously because they're new to the game and they're stepping up every single day, improving their platform every single day. So generally speaking, UX on their platform is really solid. Pipecat, it is difficult to get started. So I'm gonna give it a 0 or I'm gonna give it a 0, not because it's a bad platform or anything like that, but it's not user friendly in my opinion. It is very developer friendly. Maybe let's call it that. So what that means is you can extend everything. You can set up any analytics you want. You can literally do whatever you want with this framework. But I don't think its goal is to aim for the best builder UX. Its goal is to make it extremely extensible and capable of doing things. So it's not really the problem they're trying to solve in here. Retell, builder UX, I'm gonna give it a either 1 or 2. So I think Retell is not as advanced as Vapi and probably doesn't feel as smooth as ElevenLabs. On LiveKit, it's really solid. And on Telnyx, I'm gonna have to think about it a little bit more and maybe fill it in later. In terms of feature richness, Vapi. So how complete is the platform across telephony tools, orchestration, observability, and agent features? So with Vapi overall, they still have few things that are lacking, like emotion detection that's working. They still have a couple bugs going on here and there, but usually they happen to fix them fairly quickly. So I'm gonna give it a 2. Overall, they're really solid on that. Oh, sorry. ElevenLabs, they're not there yet. They are every single day improving, but they're clearly a newer platform. Vapi has more integrations, so I can give them as good grading as on Vapi. Pipecat, you can hook up everything you want to it. So they also offer you US phone number out of the box. I'd give it a 2. It's you can do whatever you want with it, really. Retell, so they do have solid support for telephony, and it's easy to set it up there. That being said, the observability not as good. Amount of integrations also a little bit worse than on Vapi. So I'm gonna give it a 1. With LiveKit, I think LiveKit has a lot of different things you can hook it up to. They do have very solid observability baked in, like you can navigate the timeline that shows you what happened during the call. It's you can navigate the transcript and it's synchronized with the timeline. It's so really solid. I'm gonna give it a 2. With Telnyx, observability not there yet. Sorry, but hopefully it's gonna improve. Overall, going into the right direction. Pricing. So Vapi, very simple, 5 cents per minute. It's not the best, not the worst. 1. ElevenLabs, I don't remember. I'll have to fill that in. Pipecat, very solid pricing. Retell, sorry, that's a 0. They have worse pricing. LiveKit, very solid. Telnyx, also very solid. So the way, that's a side note, the way Telnyx makes money is not via agenting platform, it's via telephony, because they round up to a full minute. And this is going to be like probably 90% of their revenue from the platform, that the fact that people use their telephony and not the voice AI platform itself. That makes sense. And debugging experience. So on Vapi, you have an ability to see the logs and view the transcripts, the filter through things, but it's not as good as it possibly could. That being said, I think it allowed me to find a lot of different issues on a larger scale with out-of-the-box things. So I'm gonna give it a 2. ElevenLabs. Actually, sorry. Let me backtrack a little bit. I have to give it a 1. That's because whenever there's an error that's happening with Vapi, it is completely random if it's gonna be a solid error or a good error. So to give an example, I used a LLM that wasn't properly supported by them, a custom LLM, and the error that was happening with this LLM on the open router provider, it was very clear, there was crystal clear. However, what was coming through Vapi was absolute garbage. It was something like, it didn't work. Sorry. So on the debugging experience, their docs sometimes are out of sync. The types are simply wrong. Things like that. Sometimes they change things without proper versioning, which breaks your production, which is annoying. So sorry, I'm gonna have to give it a 1. ElevenLabs. Similar story. So not on the front of handling errors, but on the front of it being a closed source platform. Because of that, it's much more difficult to debug more complex cases, especially with MCPs and things like that. Whenever you have a more complex setup, you really need to think hard about what's going on. Is it your agent failing because of the wrong tool call description, or what is it really? Is it just a stupid prompt stupid prompt issue that you're having, or these particular variables that are not populating properly? It's not as good as it could have been because of the fact that it is closed source, but also because of the fact that not huge amount of documentation and support is available online. So this compounds into 1. Pipecat, debugging experience, oh. Retell, I'm gonna have to give it a 1. It's also a closed source platform, similar story. On LiveKit, so on LiveKit you get this baked-in observability that's really, really solid, and the fact that you have more documentation, at least in my experience. I'm gonna give it a 2. For Telnyx, I don't have that much experience with working with Telnyx. However, I did a little bit of Googling before making this video. And according to what people say online, it's whenever you have an issue and you contact the support, it's just they're not helping you really. Unless you make a Reddit thread about it. So I'm gonna give it a 1, judging from people's experience in here. Documentation and support. So on Vapi, I'm probably gonna give it a 2. Not everything is documented, but 99% or more. Also, whenever you ask them on Discord, they're gonna reply usually, or somebody else will. So I have very positive experiences, generally speaking, with them. With ElevenLabs, it's not as great, unfortunately. With Pipecat, huge community. Whenever you need help, you can probably also sometimes get it from the CEO himself. So awesome. Similar story with Retell. It's not always as easy. With LiveKit, also a huge amount of community and in general support. So on that front, I'm gonna give it a 2. With Telnyx, with documentation, I feel like they're still lacking a little bit. I checked different things and I simply didn't understand it from the very roughly. how and where I should head to in certain cases. Also because of the lack of that good support, it's a little bit more difficult. So I'm gonna give it a 1. And the last part is probably most important actually, but I'm not gonna answer it here because I'm gonna make another video on this topic. That's due to the fact that it is a huge topic in itself, like how to comply with different regulations and finding the best option here. And also there are a couple different platforms very specific to this issue that I did not cover in here. So yeah, if you're interested, keep an eye on the upcoming video. So I think on the ElevenLabs, I'm going to give you an answer very shortly. So ElevenLabs has a very interesting tactic here. So they're charging for the voice platform 10 cents per minute on a smaller plans and a little bit less on the bigger plans. So generally speaking, it is really terrible actually. Sorry, ElevenLabs, your pricing sucks. Oh my god. I don't understand it. Nevertheless, their UX for very small agents and like shipping things fast is very solid. So I can recommend that. Okay. I hope. Oh, there's also one more question. How polished is the builder dashboard and user experience? Oh yeah. Okay. I'm gonna give it a 1. I think it's the fact that the observability is not as good as it could have been, and like this is important part of building things and iterating on it. I think there's still a little bit of work to do. That being said, Telnyx is very strong in general, and especially like with more complex features, they have really solid API. So I do recommend them, despite the score maybe not being perfect and maybe not reflecting it generally. So I hope you liked it. Keep in mind it's all based on my feelings and overall attitude, let's call it, towards different voice AI providers. That being said, just looking at the scoring, I think it did not really reflect ElevenLabs how good it is for the small and probably medium-sized businesses. Yeah, I think they're a little bit better than the score reflects. With Pipecat, for small businesses, not really. Sorry, it's not the best player here. Generally speaking, LiveKit, incredibly solid. Also, their speech detection things, awesome. So I hope you enjoyed it. Even if the scoring doesn't reflect what you think, I hope you learned something along the way. And I hope I'll see you next time. See you.